to you, sir.
Good evening, good afternoon, everybody. At the outset, I'd like to thank the organizers of CapCon 2020 for inviting me and giving me this opportunity. And hello.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, am I audible? Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. And I thank Dr. Venkatesh for the kind words of introduction. The topic allotted to me is the interpretation of EEG in children. I'm sure we as pediatricians, we always come across children with seizures. And whenever we see children with seizures, we also come across this EEG. Either we ask for EEG or a patient comes to you with the EEG record and the report. As Dr. Venkatesh rightly told, most of us not exposed to EEG in our post-graduate days, and we don't know how to interpret the EEG or how to look at the EEG recordings. So my talk in the next 20 or 25 minutes, I'll try to just give the basics of interpretation of EEG in children. As you all know, EEG is a scalp recording of brainwave activity. The brainwave activity recorded is a summation of the inhibitory and the excitatory postsynaptic potentials that occur across a neuronal membrane. It provides direct rather than indirect evidence of epileptic abnormality. And at times, it may be the only test that shows abnormality in children with epilepsy. So coming to the topic EEG interpretation. So whenever we look at the record, we should know first what we are looking at. We look at the montages in the record. Okay. So when you look at montages, there are two things. One is electrodes and one is channel. Electrodes are the leads that we place on the scalp, and a pair of electrode is called as channel. And the way we arrange this channel is called as montages. And we use the international 10-20 system to place the leads on the scalp. So some basics. Whenever we place leads on the scalp, we use these different abbreviations. FP is frontopolar or prefrontal leads. F is the frontal leads. We say Z when it's in the midline. Okay, and we use the odd numbers for the left-sided leads and even number for the right-sided leads. As the number increases, we go away from the midline. For example, this would be the left frontal. This is the right frontal. This would be the right central. This would be the right temporal, and this would be the left temporal. Okay, so these are we place the leads on the scalp. The right-sided leads are even number, and the left is odd number. A pair of lead is called as channel, and the way we arrange channel is called as montages. Okay, this is an example of a longitudinal bipolar montage. Bipolar means we take two leads on the brain and we connect them, and the way we arrange these channels is called as the bipolar montage. If you look at in this picture, this is like a banana. You can see there are two bananas which are placed side by side. This is called as double banana montage. This is also called as longitudinal bipolar montage. Sometimes we can take all the leads and connect them to one particular lead. That is called as unipolar montage. Here in this example, we have connected all the leads to the ipsilateral A1. A1 is the auricular or the ear lead. So it's called as ipsilateral ear referential montage. So once you have seen the montages, then you come to the record proper. So this is the the right event called as unipolar montage. After you've seen the montage, then we go to the sensitivity. Sensitivity is also called as the gain. It refers to the amplitude of these waveforms. When you see the waveforms and you look at amplitude, or to describe the amplitude, we use the term sensitivity. The gist is you choose a value here. You can see here, this is the sensitivity, and here it is 7.5 microvolts per millimeter. Okay. So the gist is whatever voltage you decide to read at, you will see the waveforms at that particular voltage. The lower the voltage, the larger the amplitude of the waves, and the higher the voltage, the amplitude of waves is very small. Usually we read at a voltage that allows you to see the waveforms at the best, and by convention we usually look at 7.5 microvolts as a convention. Okay. This is a record which is read at 7.5 microvolts. Same record if you see at 2 microvolts. Okay, here the sensitivity is 2 microvolts. You can see the waveforms have come too large in size now. Okay, same thing if you look at 30 microvolts, you can see that they are very small. Okay, so depending upon the settings, the waveform size can be altered. Usually you should always look at the record at 7.5 microvolts. Okay, so first step is the montage, whether it is bipolar or unipolar montage. Then comes the sensitivity. Usually you should read at 7.5 microvolts. After sensitivity, the most important part is the filters. So we have three type of filters: low frequency filter, high frequency filter and notch filter. Okay, so what happens in EEG is we are recording the tiny electric activity from the neurons. Okay, so it's not possible to record this on the paper. So what we do is we amplify. So we amplify the waveforms and then we record on the paper. When we amplify, we not only amplify the real activity from the brain, but we also amplify a lot of other activities is happening in the environment. Okay, so to we need to filter the waveforms which are not important. So we usually use the filters. So we put filters so that the important waves which are important for clinician are amplified. Okay, so for that we use these filters, low frequency and high frequency filter. Or the low frequency filter, the gist is whatever number you set it, the EEG will not amplify any frequency below that number. For example, if you set up a filter, a low filter at 1 Hertz, the EEG will not amplify any waves below 1 Hertz. Usually we set the filter at 1 Hertz. It's very important. Then we have the high frequency filter. It is just opposite of the low frequency filter. And here the EEG will not display any frequencies above this designated number. And by convention, I use the high frequency filter at 70 Hertz. So this is very important. Low frequency of 1 Hertz and high frequency of 70 Hertz. Sometimes what happens is that because just to make the waveforms clean and neat, no, the technician may set a filter at 5 Hertz. Okay, if you set the filter at 5 Hertz, no, the waveforms will look very clean, but all the activities less than 5 Hertz will be filtered out. So you may miss out important findings like focal slowing. And most of the EEG in children contains of slow frequency activity. So always the low frequency filter should be 1 Hertz, not less than not more than 1 Hertz. Then we have the notch filter. This is a special filter that sharply cut off the activity at 60 Hertz. Most of the current that flows through plugs in our EEG rooms is at 60 Hertz. So if you put a filter at 60 Hertz, we can remove all these electrical artifacts. So I'm sure all of you are thinking that it's enough of technical. Can you please learn how to read the EEG? We want the real stuff. Okay, so we will come to the real stuff. So when it comes to interpreting the EEG, we need to break it into different steps. The first one is to look at the background activity. Background activity gives you an overall sense of what's going on with the child. Okay. Then after you look at the background activity, look at the symmetry. Compare the symmetric areas of the right and the left side and look for any changes seen. Okay. Look for any asymmetry. Asymmetry in the amplitude, asymmetry in the frequency of the waveforms. Then third is stage of alertness. Very, very important. Whether the child is awake, okay, or he is asleep. If he is in asleep, what is the stage of sleep? Is in stage 1 sleep, stage 2, stage 3, stage 4. It's very important, especially in children, because in children we most of the times do a sleep induced record because they don't cooperate for awake record. We are in most centers we give sedation with pedicloryl and we do a sleep recorded EEG. Okay, and as the baby sleeps, okay, we do tend to see a lot of these sleep variations like vortex waves, sleep spindles. Okay, and if the baby has slept for longer time, that is baby has gone in stage 3, stage 4 sleep, we can see diffuse low background activity. So encephalopathy in a child depending. So when it comes to background activity, I thought it gives a sense of how the child is doing. It is best evaluated in the posterior channel, usually the occipital leads. Patient has to have eyes closed. And we have got 4 different frequencies. I'm sure you all remember from your NDBS days, the delta waves, theta waves, alpha and beta. Okay. Delta waves means the frequency is between 1 to 3 Hertz. Theta is 4 to 7 Hertz. Alpha when the frequency is between 8 to 13. And we use the term beta when it is above 13 Hertz. In children beyond 3 to 4 years of age, the background activity usually contains the alpha, that is 8 to 13 Hertz. If you have a child beyond 4 years of age but has got a background activity of 4 to 7 Hertz or 1 to 3 Hertz, and if he is awake, okay, then it becomes abnormal. Sometimes when we have children where we use sedatives like benzodiazepines to sedate the baby for EEG, we get excess of beta activity. When the child is awake with eyes open also, we get more of beta activity. This is an example of a delta frequency background activity. In EEG, we have these vertical lines. 2 vertical lines is 1 second. This is 1 second, okay? And you count the number of waves in 1 second. For example, if you can see in this 1 second, there are 2 waves. So this will be 2 Hertz, okay? So therefore delta is 1 to 3 Hertz because there are 2 waves in 1 second. It is 2 Hertz activity and it's called as delta frequency background activity. Now, this is an example of a theta frequency activity. Okay, if you can see this again 1 second, you can count the number of waves 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, 6. As I told, between 4 to 7 is called as theta frequency. Okay, this is a theta frequency background activity. This is beta. You can see there are many waves here. Okay, definitely it's more than 15 to 20. Okay, this is a beta frequency background activity. Okay, and this is the typical alpha activity which we all are familiar with. Okay, this is usually seen in the posterior leads. Posterior leads means the occipital leads. So this is 1 second, and you can count the number of waves: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, it's from 9 to 10 hertz. That is a typical alpha range background activity. So once you've seen the background activity, count the number of waves, so you know the frequency of background activity. Then you can look at the corresponding regions. Look for any asymmetry. Like here, the occipital lead on the right side, occipital on the left side. Okay, they look quite symmetric. If there is any asymmetry, then you should make a note of that asymmetry. So we say EEG is normal when there is normal background activity, that is alpha frequency in children more than 4 years of age. In less than 4 years, the activity should be appropriate to the child's age. Then there is no abnormalities. Okay, nothing stands out in the background. No spike waves, sharp waves, or no slow waves. Okay, and in EEG we always do some provocative tests like photic stimulation and hyperventilation. Okay, there should not be no changes in the EEG or no abnormality on EEG after provocation with photic stimulation, hyperventilation, and there should not be any asymmetry. This is a typical normal record. Okay, now we'll see some abnormalities. Okay, you can see, look at this record. Okay, this is the bipolar montage because you have the left temporal and the left central and right temporal and the right central chain here. Okay, you compare the activity of the right with the left-sided leads. Okay, if this is the left-sided leads, okay, you can see the amplitude here. Okay, and the frequency, it comes around 8 to 9 hertz here. Okay, and compared with the right side, okay, you can see here it's hardly 3 to 4 hertz. Like, okay, you can see 1, 2, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so compared to the left side, there's definitely slowing in the right side. Not only slowing, the waveforms are larger in amplitude. Like, okay, this indicates that is right hemispheric slowing. Okay, so based on this finding, you can say there is right hemispheric slowing. And whenever you find focal slowing or hemispheric slowing in the EEG activity, it could mean focal lesions like tumor or a granuloma or an infarct. Okay, sometimes we also see in surgical post-surgical cases also. It is easy to see with unipolar montage or referential montage. And sometimes when you don't find in routine EEG activity, after hyperventilation or photic stimulation, this can be unmasked. So if you find focal slowing, it usually indicates a structural localized pathology in the brain. Then sometimes we see this activity called as PLEDS. PLEDS is periodic lateralized epileptiform discharges. Okay. You can see here in the left T5 lead. Okay, you find this activity. Okay, it is occurring at a 1 to 2 hertz frequency throughout the record. Okay, so you can see here it occurs through the entire EEG at a frequency of 1 to 2 hertz. It is usually localized to one area of the brain. Okay, mostly in one hemisphere, but something called as biplets is there where you can have in both the hemispheres. Okay, and when you see this plates, it usually indicates acute lesions like stroke, bleed, post-ictal phenomenon, usually typical of herpes simplex encephalitis and CJD, that's a slow viral disease. There is a controversy over whether what does this mean? Do they really mean epileptic activity or non-convulsive status? And it's not very clear whether should we treat these plates with anti-epileptic drugs. But it's a very good indicator of a acute structural lesion like stroke, bleed, or infection like herpes simplex encephalitis. Sometimes what we see is we find epileptic activity. There is spikes and sharp waves ongoing in a particular lead. Okay, you can see here in this child in the T5 lead, you see continuous sharp waves activity in this lead throughout the record. Okay, this is nothing but focal or partial status epilepticus. This is status involving one hemisphere. Patient may, because it is focal, patient may still be able to converse or appear awake during this type of seizure. And we need not necessarily treat this type of seizure with drugs like anesthetics. They need anticonvulsant drug, but we need not go with anesthetics. You should aggressively treat these children with anti-epileptic drugs so that they don't go for secondary generalized status. Now we come to the abnormalities in EEGs like epileptiform activities. We all are fond of this term epileptiform activities. What does this mean? It means that the EEG reader saw some abnormalities that may be related to seizures, but still needs clinical correlation. It is not epileptic, it is epileptiform. Okay, this term epileptiform means it may be related. Okay, it is not 100% suggestive of epilepsy, and hence always needs a very good clinical correlation. It usually means that EEG readers saw either sharp waves, spike waves, or slow waves. I'll just describe these three terms in my subsequent slides. It does not mean that patient is seizing during the EEG. So epileptiform discharges always need not be treated with anti-epileptic drugs. So we'll see these terms. What is sharp wave, spike wave, and slow waves? Okay. So coming to the first term, spikes. If you look at the EEG record, I told these two vertical lines represent 1 second, and this is divided into 5 parts. Okay, so each would be 200 milliseconds. Okay, so if you have a wave in the EEG, okay, which is less than 70 microvolt, which is very sharp, which is standing out from the background, and it is less than 70 microvolt, it is called as spike. You can see here, if this is 20 milliseconds, okay, this wave is definitely around 50 microvolts. Okay, so if the waveform is sharp, less than 70 microvolts, okay, and it is standing out from the background, it is called as spike. This would be a spike wave here. Okay, sometimes you have multiple spikes. This is called as polyspike. Okay, this is a unispike and this is a polyspike. Okay, and they should stand out from the background. It's very important to call it as abnormal. No? It should be striking from the background. Okay, this is the same record. I had zoomed it there. Okay, this is the actual record here. You can see in the T5 lead. Okay, in the T5 lead you find these spikes here. Okay, they are less than 70 microvolts and they're standing from the background. You can make out this is a background activity. This is standing out from the background here. Okay, so this is a epileptic activity, epileptic spikes coming from the O1 lead here. Like, okay. So here, because along with this epileptic activity, you find some amount of slowing in the lead here. We call as symptomatic occipital epilepsy or focal epilepsy arising from the occipital leads. Sometimes we have a wave which is not as short as a spike. Okay, it is slightly more longer than the spike. Okay, then we call it as sharp waves. If it is less than 70, we call it as spike. If it is 70 to 200 microvolt, we call it as a sharp wave. Okay, and when we see the spikes and sharp waves, we look at this phenomenon called as phase reversal. Okay, you can look at this here. Okay, these are mirror images. Okay, there is a mirror image here, and depending on where it reverts. Okay, here it is phase reversal at T3. Okay, so this is a lead sharp wave arising from the T3 lead here. Okay, so the phase reversal tell you the localization or the origin of the spike or the sharp wave. Again, it has to stand out from the background. Okay, to call it as abnormal, it has to be a slope. There should be a up slope and a down slope. Okay, if it is straight, okay, then it could be a artifact. I'll just show an example later on. Then we use the term slow waves. Use the term slow waves when it is more than 200 microvolts. You can see here, okay, this is definitely more than 200 microvolts. This is a slow wave. And typically you have a spike and a slow wave complex, okay, or a sharp wave and a slow wave complex. When you have a spike and slow wave complex or a sharp wave and slow wave complex, they are usually suggestive of epilepsy. Okay. Sometimes what happens is we can actually record a seizure activity during the EEG. And it's called as ictal record. Okay, not just epileptiform. We can actually record the seizures during the EEG. The EEG reader can tell if it was a partial or a generalized. Okay, status when it is more than 30 minutes. Okay, and it is considered with primary generalized syndrome. The seizure should be like a wave. That is, there should be onset, there is a build up, and then there is a let down. When you see these three phases, then we call it as an ictal activity or ictal record. When the EEG reader tells you about this, you need to treat this children with anti-epileptic drugs. Okay. This is an example here wherein you have a focal seizure starting from the temporal lobe. Okay, this is the T3 is the temporal, the left temporal. This is the T4, that is the right temporal here. Okay, you can see the activity is starting in the left temporal leads here. Okay, then there is a build up here. Okay, then you can see the next record. Okay, there is a progression of the ictal activity. It is building amplitude and the frequency is also increasing. Okay, now it has become spread to the opposite side also. Okay, now it is getting generalized. Okay, and here you can see it is become a generalized seizure now. Then the seizure is ending now, and as the seizure is ending, you get as the seizure ends, you get a post-ictal slowing activity. Okay, here we had a child who had left temporal onset seizure with secondary generalization, and that led to this post-ictal slowing. Okay, when you see this type of activity during the EEG record, it is definitely an epileptic seizure, and these are the children who need to be treated with anticonvulsant drug. Okay, those who have only epileptiform discharges, okay, they have to be correlated clinically. We need to look at the history, we need to look at the video of the child, and then decide whether we need to treat those cases or not. But when you have this little activity in the EEG record, these children do need treatment. This is an example, like I told, a temporal lobe seizure with secondary generalization. This is the typical record of a primary generalized epilepsy. Okay, what we most of them are genetic in origin. Okay, there is generalized burst of activity of a spike slow wave or a polyspike slow wave. You can see there is a spike and a slow wave. There is a spike and a slow wave. There are more than one spike occurs. Polyspike slow wave complexes. Okay, and in such cases, usually we get a response to photic stimulation. We get a photoparoxysmal response, and we have this type of EEG with a positive photoparoxysmal response. It usually suggests idiopathic generalized epilepsy, most probably juvenile myoclonic epilepsy, and these cases need sodium valproate. If you give carbamazepine, these are the cases which can worsen after you start sodium channel blockers like carbamazepine or phenytoin. Sometimes we find generalized epileptiform discharges in form of spike slow wave activity, but if you carefully look at these spikes, no, they can be preceded by few focal spikes. Okay, so there's some focal spiking here, and that leads to the generalized discharges here. Okay, this is called as secondary bilateral generalized bisynchrony. Okay, it means that it has a focal onset, then it has got secondarily generalized. Okay, generalized burst following a localized focal abnormal epileptiform discharges here. Okay, it is not primary generalized epilepsy. This is nothing but this suggests of a focal onset with secondary bilateral synchrony. Okay, and these cases may need drugs like carbamazepine or phenytoin. But in primary general epilepsy, we do not use carbamazepine or phenytoin. Whereas for a focal seizure with secondary generalization, we prefer drugs like carbamazepine or phenytoin. So EEG really helps you in even helping you to choose the right drug also. Then after you have seen this epileptiform discharge like spikes, shafts, and slow waves, sometimes we do see triphasic waves. Okay, they're usually seen in metabolic or toxic encephalopathy, usually liver cell failure, hepatic encephalopathy, uremic encephalopathy. Sometimes also use of antibiotic like cefepime can produce this type of picture. Patient always has some degree of mild to moderate encephalopathy. And when you look at these EEGs, there is diffuse slowing in the background native also. You find anterior dominant, diffuse, bilateral synchronous activity here. Okay, they're called as triphasic waves because they have three phases. Okay, there is a negative phase, there is a positive phase, and then there is a negative. Okay, because of these three phases called as triphasic waves. And if you look at these waves carefully, there is a lag anterior to posteriorly. Okay, if you look at this wave, definitely there is a anterior to posterior lag. That is very characteristic of this toxic encephalopathy or metabolic encephalopathies. Sometimes they get this burst suppression pattern. Okay, if you look at the record, no, you have a burst of activity for a couple of seconds, and then there is a suppressed or attenuated activity for a few seconds. For here, you can see there is burst for about 2 seconds, and there is a attenuation for about 10 seconds. Again, there is a burst for 2 seconds, and then there is a attenuation. Okay, this is called as burst suppression pattern. It's a very bad EEG. Okay, when spontaneous, it indicates very poor prognosis. It's usually seen following hypoxic events, and uniformly they have a poor outcome. It is seen after a severe hypoxic event, post-ictal record sometimes. Okay, sometimes it can be seen in anesthesia and induced coma also. Okay, whenever we have a childish status and we try to use anesthetic drugs, this is the endpoint what we are looking for. Okay, we expect the EEG to show the suppression pattern for at least 24 hours before we start withdrawing the anesthetic drugs. In this burst suppression pattern, the suppression part should have activity of less than 10 microvolt. Then we call it as burst suppression pattern. This is a common record what we see in our practice, that is hypseremia, which is seen in children with infantile spasms or West syndrome. Okay, you see at this record is got a chaotic background. Okay, but there is no any pattern to the background. Okay, here so you find theta activity, you find delta activity, sometimes you find beta activity. There is a mixture of various frequencies. There is no any pattern. Okay, there is no any symmetry also. Okay, and along with this chaotic background pattern, you find these spikes. You can see a spike which is coming from the left occipital here. Okay, and there is one more spike here which is not resembling this spike. It's a different morphology. Okay, then there are some activities in the central here, some in the frontal here. Okay, so you find bilateral spikes not in a particular pattern. Okay, when you get spikes in more than more than 3 regions, we call it as multifocal epilepsy. Okay, fine, multifocal spikes on a irregular chaotic background, that is typical of hypseremia. And during the record, this child has get a spasm, you get this electrodecremental response. Okay, and in electrodecremental response, you get attenuation of the activity. Okay, When you see this pattern, it is typical for hypseremia. And these are the patients who need ECTH or corticosteroids like prednisolone for treatment. They do not respond to other lines of management. And if there is underlying tuberous sclerosis, we go for vigabatrin. EEG also helps in picking up condition like SSP. SSP is subacute sclerosing panencephalitis, and in this condition we get what is called as periodic epileptiform discharges. Okay, you can see at a particular interval, maybe for every 6 to 8 minutes, we get this epileptiform discharges. It's a generalized discharge called as GPEDs, generalized periodic epileptiform discharges. Okay, it is different from a suppression burst pattern because here in between bursts, the background is not less than 10 microvolt. In suppression burst pattern, background would be less than 10 microvolt here. Whereas here it is not less than 10 microvolt. It is usually more than 10 to 20 microvolt activity there. But you get this periodic generalized discharges. This is called as periodic complexes. Quite typical for SSP, especially if the interval between two discharges is more than 6 to 8 seconds. That is called as long interval generalized periodic discharges. Sometimes we get this flat record, okay, that is electrocerebral silence. It is a marker of brain death, okay. But to diagnose brain death on EEG, there are specialized EEG protocols, okay. And it is when you see this record, it essentially means the patient is brain dead. However, it is not routinely performed because to run EEG for required period of time without seeing any artifact is very difficult in our setup. There are fixed criteria how to record, how long to record, okay, and it's not practically or routinely done in our practice. So we should always be aware of these artifacts because these artifacts can always confuse us for epileptiform discharges, and because of this we may what you call over interpret EEG and start children on drugs. Okay, this is a typical eye blink artifact. Okay, if you're not aware of this, it looks like a spike slow wave. Okay, many of the reports what I see they are reported as frontal epileptiform discharges. Okay, they say EEG is observed of bifrontal sharp waves. Okay, most of them are nothing but eye blinks here. Okay, this is not at all epileptiform discharge, a normal artifact. Okay, sometimes when the child is awake or very anxious, is not relaxing, you get this muscle artifacts. Okay, you see excess beta activity. Okay, this is nothing but a muscle artifact. Okay, one clue how to pick up muscle artifact is you take out the high frequency filter, it will worsen. If it worsens or removing high frequency filter, it means it is a muscle artifact. This is, if you look at this EEG, you find these small waves. Okay, you can see almost on all the leads. Okay, and occurring at a very regular interval. Okay, this is nothing but a ECG artifact. You can see this is the ECG record here. They correspond to the ECG waves here. Okay, this is nothing but a ECG artifacts. If you're not aware of this, or if the person has not taken this ECG in the EEG record, okay, you may confuse them for a focal epileptiform discharges. Okay, the regularity and the correlation with the ECG, we should help you picking up these ECG artifacts. In children, as I told, we always do a sleep EEG. Okay, so the sleep changes are also seen in our records. Okay, this is an example of sleep spindles. You can see this 13 to 20 microvolt activity, hertz activity seen mainly in the central. It's called the sleep spindles. Okay, sometimes we get this vortex waves followed by sleep spindles, called as K complexes. Okay, sometimes when you see vortex waves, they're also confused for epileptiform discharges. Okay, if you know the child is asleep, and especially studied in stage 1 sleep, when you see these waves, and they usually seen in the central, that is CZ lead, it is an vortex wave, not a epileptiform discharges.
Excuse me, sir. Yeah, you have 2 minutes, sir.
Yes, sir, fine. I'm finishing, sir. When you see the report, you always look for this epileptiform activity. The epileptiform waves mean they have the potential to cause seizures, but clinical correlation is very important. You do photic stimulation and you look for the response to photic stimulation. It can be positive in a primary generalized epilepsy, or it can trigger asymmetries. You can look for photic driving. It means that patient shows normal response to photic stimulation. No driving means there is no response to photic stimulation. After hyperventilation, we can get epileptiform discharges in primary general epilepsy like absence epilepsy, and sometimes it can evoke asymmetries or slowing also. Okay. As I told, to pick up stages of sleep also it's helpful. In stage 1, you get vortex waves. In stage 2, you get K complex with sleep spindles. Okay. Drowsiness can provoke epileptiform discharges, and it can even show background slowing also. Okay, because drowsiness provokes epileptiform activity, we always for a sleep deprived EEG and a sleep induced EEG. Then look for the background slowing also, whether it's theta delta frequency, because it can suggest encephalopathic state or a drug effect. Okay, and if there's focal slowing, it usually indicates focal lesion like tumor, stroke, or hippocampal sclerosis. So just to conclude, it's important to note that EEG lacks both sensitivity and specificity. Okay, it is often normal even in children with epilepsy. It lacks specificity. Okay, it can see epileptiform discharges in normal children, those who do not have any epilepsy, and it is more prone for misinterpretation. Okay, if you do a standard awake EEG, 50% of children with epilepsy can have a normal record. But if you do a sleep EEG, okay, the abnormality is in 80%. So always ask for a sleep deprived, sleep induced EEG. When you do repeated EEGs, 92% can be abnormal, but still 80% can be normal. Okay. It's important to note that 10% of children without epilepsy can have abnormalities on EEG. So just don't go by the epileptiform report on the EEG. Why it lacks specificity is because we do a scalp EEG and the electrical signal can get attenuated by the skull and the soft tissues. Okay, sometimes the epileptic area can be very deep. Okay, like in the frontal lobe or in the temporal lobe, which is away from the scalp. So you can miss the discharges from these areas, and hence the EEG can be normal in a child with genuine epilepsy also. Okay, and as we all know, epilepsy is always episodic. Okay, and we do a EEG only for about 20 minutes, 30 minutes, and during that activity, if there is no activity, you may miss the epileptic discharges, and hence EEG can be normal in a child with true epilepsy also. Okay. So this is the current role of epilepsy. EEG is not required for diagnosing epilepsy, but it's very important to support the clinical diagnosis of epilepsy. Okay, it helps to classify seizures, like I told you, this focal or generalized or absence or myoclonic. You can diagnose the type of seizure also. It helps to localize the focus. Decision to stop ED. Before stopping ED also you can do EEG, and that can help you whether to stop the ED or not. Okay, it's not a good guide to the effectiveness of treatment. So don't use EEG for knowing the effectiveness of treatment, except in absence and hypsarrhythmia. So to summarize, whenever you have a EEG record, always first have a clinical diagnosis and you have a clinical localization. Then look at the quality of the record and the montages. Look at the sensitivity and the filters. Look at the background, look for any asymmetry, look for sleep changes and the normal variants, then look for epileptiform discharge and the localization. Then look at the response for activation like photic and hyperventilation. Okay. Then read the report and interpret. Thank you. Is there any questions I can take? Yeah.
Rahul sir, unmute yourself.
Thank you, sir, for your excellent presentation. To cover topic of EEG in 20 minutes is tough task.
Yeah.
And sir has explained beautifully all the details of EEG, then how to read it, abnormal EEG, normal EEG, and artifacts in EEG, usefulness of EEG. The most important thing is that EEG should be interpreted in the context of clinical history. That is it has to be used for support of diagnosis of epilepsy. So one question is there. Which montage is prepared when? Which montage is prepared when?
Yeah, any record we should always do bipolar and unipolar. Like, you should always do longitudinal bipolar montage and unipolar montage. It's a must. Okay. Sometimes you may go for a transverse montage also, like depending upon the localization. No? Especially our frontal lobe epilepsy or occipital epilepsy, you may have to go for a transverse montage also. But routinely you should do both longitudinal bipolar and unipolar montage.
Another question, sir. According to Cochrane review, it doesn't endorse or refute the use of EEG in complex febrile seizure. So what's your opinion about EEG in complex febrile seizure?
Yeah, it's a very good question. Thanks for that. Okay. If you really look at that Cochrane report, no, when they tried to look at the role of EEG in complex febrile seizures, they did not find any randomized controlled trial. Okay. So therefore, they concluded that there is no evidence for role of EEG in complex febrile seizures. When you do EEG in a complex febrile seizure and you get it abnormal, it does not either predict recurrence or the risk of long-term epilepsy. That's how routinely we don't do EEG for complex febrile seizures. But the FEBSTAT study, that is febrile status epilepticus study, which was done in US in the last decade, they did studied 200 children with febrile status. And what they found was when there is febrile status, that is seizure lasting for more than 30 minutes, and if you do EEG within 72 hours, and if it shows focal slowing or focal attenuation, then these were the babies who had a high chance of developing MTS in future. They were correlated with hippocampal signal abnormalities on MRI also, and they had a higher chance of going for MTS. So only in febrile status epilepticus, That too, if you can do EEG in 72 hours, it has some role. Otherwise, typical complex febrile, those who are like recurrent or focal, EEG has no role, because an abnormal EEG will not predict either recurrence or chance of future epilepsy. So other than febrile status, that is seizure for more than 30 minutes, if you can do EEG in 72 hours, only then there is role for EEG. Otherwise, other febrile seizures, there is no role for EEG.
Prasanna sir, we have time for further questions?
No, we have to make it fast because it's around 5:45.
Okay, fine.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir.
Thank you,
sir, for your excellent and informative lecture.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Venkatesh sir. Now I will hand over next proceedings to Dr. Prasanna sir.